In this episode, I interviewed Joey Mure from Wealth Without Wall Street, a very well-known and loved infinite banking company and podcast. And we're just going to talk about infinite banking and what it is and why it matters to us, and touch on some really important points that really matter to us and what we've seen working with our clients and so forth. So this is Dollars and Nonsense. My name is Michael Duryea. Welcome back to the Dollars and Nonsense show. If you follow the herd, you will be slaughtered. Joey, welcome.
Michael, man, this is such a treat to be in the right room with the right people talking about the right message. So thank you for having me.
It's a joy and an honor to have you here. I remember our meeting several months ago where we really linked up and decided we were going to do this. And that was a really fun meeting, just talking about just everything that we've done with infinite banking and what infinite banking is and why it matters to us. So, yeah, go ahead and just to get started, just tell us, I would like to know how many years you've been in infinite banking.
I got introduced to this concept in 2009. I was full-time in the mortgage business at the time and making great money, but didn't really feel successful financially because I didn't have a hand on my finances. I had really abdicated most of the leadership required to steward my finances to Wall Street and to big banks and things like that. And unknowingly, I will say, it was just my default.
Unknowingly. Yeah, right? Exactly. Yeah.
And when I got, when I was shared the book with my now business partner, Russ Morgan, it was like, this makes all the sense. This is the kind of thing I've been wondering. Where's this at?
Where's that? Does this exist? Yeah. That's exactly. Yeah. I know. I went through the same thing. I know exactly what you mean.
And it was kind of like this lightning bolt moment to say, of course, I'm not having success financially. I'm not taking control of my finances. And this book is all about taking back the banking function, which is the absolute fabric of being a good steward of your finances. If you're not the banker in your life, someone else is.
Yes, right.
And they're out for their own good, rightly so, right? Like they're running their own business.
Yeah.
And so why would I not figure out how to be that banker in my own life? And that has snowballed over the years. Of course, that started with my starting my first policy. Within the first year, starting 3 policies because I just started to have my mind open to what was possible. And 4 years later, I literally was sitting with my now business partner at a conference, and I heard all these people talking about how they were helping people like me take control of their finances, how they were implementing the infinite banking concept into their lives. We're talking churches, corporations, individuals, single moms. I mean, you name it, this concept is for everyone. And I was struck, Michael. I was sitting there and I thought, why don't more people do this? And I looked around the room, and there was maybe 200 to 300 people in that room who were certified IBC practitioners. And this was for all of North America at the time in 2013, 2014. And I remember it was like, there's been very few times where I would say this is true, but it was like God audibly said, why don't you do it? And I literally, I liken it to, he put his thumb in my back and pushed me and said, why don't you do it? And I literally left that conference and I told Russ, I said, I think I'm supposed to do this full time. Like, I think I'm supposed to be obedient, like to walk through this next stage of life and do this with you, like get the word out. And he was like, really? Are you serious? Because I had to give up my career for 11 years in the mortgage business. I was making well over $300,000 a year in my, early 30s. And I, for all intents and purposes, had no reason to. But I think that's
Mhm.
what the people in my sphere knew that about me, and they were shocked. They were like, "Wait a minute, you're not doing mortgage anymore? Like, why are you
Hmm.
leaving your career?" And that gave me a great opportunity to say, "Man, let me tell you about this concept because it's made all the difference in my life."
I think it was you, and I'm going to ask you to confirm this for me, but I think I have a memory. This was like 5 years ago, at least, maybe more, where I first listened to the first Wealth Without Wall Street podcast I ever listened to. And I think I remember you referring to yourself as like a recovering mortgage broker or something like that. Was that you? I think that was you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
Like, yeah, like I did it. It was great. I was just helping people get mortgages for their homes, etc. And then I found out about this and I thought, whoa, there's just a better way to do banking. Like,
I don't want to be a part of the problem anymore. You know, I,
right.
I, I think it's
It's a little bit better to be part of the solution than the problem. Is that what you're saying?
exactly. And I think it's funny because Russ was a CFP. He was literally a Wall Street guy.
That stands
Um,
for certified financial planner, right?
yeah. He was a money manager. He was helping people to put money
Yeah.
on Wall Street. And here I was helping people to do more and more business with banks. And we both read this book and we're like, wait a minute, we need to quit being a part of the enemy here. Like this is not the solution. And so yeah, we both turned 180 and went the other way.
That's awesome. Well, I'll just mention really briefly because I don't know how many of the listeners know this. I know a lot of them do about me, but I was a professional musician before I got into infinite banking and actually was a client of Living Wealth for 2 years. I didn't find out about infinite banking until 2018.
Oh wow.
So, but I'm only 33 years old. I'm going on 34, so I'm a little ways. Like your kids are older than mine and stuff. But I found out I started reading Nelson's book in 2017 actually, and I read it twice, and it made I just couldn't see it.
Mm.
I couldn't make sense of it. And I have a really great friend and mentor, Greg, who said, "You need to read that book again." And for whatever reason, the third time I read it, I went, "Oh my gosh, this works." Like this is a philosophy for money that I can apply to my entire financial picture. And this is not something that some guy from Alabama made up in the 1980s. This is a deep ancient truth that the Lord actually brought to him and asked him to share with people.
No
And
doubt.
I saw that the third time I read the book, and I immediately went up to, I live only about an hour drive from the Living Wealth home office. And Greg was like, "You have no excuse. You got to, you got to go up there." So I went up there and I got my first policy. And then in 2020, I was a music director for churches, playing the pipe organ, leading the choir, teaching private music lessons, helping out at the university, teaching in the elementary school, all that. I mean, I was all over the place doing stuff with music and having a great time, and people told me, "Don't go into music. There's no money in music." And like, that's not true. Like, music is just like everything else. If you're good at it, you can make good money doing it. Um, I was probably only making 50 or 60,000 a year at that time, but as a professional musician, that was pretty good for me at that time. And anyway, and then in 2020, Ray called me and said, "I want you to work for me." So, and I actually had been praying for God to show me the way forward because I needed to better my career, and I was considering going back and getting my doctorate in music, and then ending up in a big church at a big city somewhere or at a big university. But Ray called. I asked God to show me a way where I could stay in the Midwest and stay here in eastern Kansas near the family farm and use my gifts that he had given me because I was a conductor and that I loved people and working with people. And so Ray called me and said, "I want you to work for me." When I started praying, I went, "Okay, God, well, I don't really know. That doesn't make sense to me, but yeah, I can tell it's from you, so I'm just going to jump in with both feet and trust you." And it's been great. It's just been awesome the
That's
whole
so
time.
cool.
So it's so great to hear that story, though. Again, I think I had heard that story again, like I said, years ago of yours. being in banking, in mortgages and stuff. And what a great background for somebody who's now like, I have other questions for you that I need to ask you in another meeting just about mortgages and underwriting and stuff, because we really do a lot of the principles that bankers use for commercial banks. We use those same principles when we build a family bank.
100%. Yeah. And you know what was interesting to me is working at the bank, at the big bank. I didn't really understand how the banking function was working. I mean, can you
Mm-hmm.
imagine that? Like, I was there, I was doing a job for the bank, but whenever I read Nelson's book, it made more sense. I started to like see the context of what I was actually doing. And I'll share one other little fun fact. As I learned this, I was reading this book. I went around to the business bankers, the regional vice presidents, the highest level
Yeah.
executives in the bank in my city here in Birmingham,
Mm-hmm.
Alabama, because I had a relationship with these guys, and I said, hey, what do you think about this idea like of storing cash in whole life policies and using the cash value to like create a banking function for you and your family?
Mm-hmm.
And not one of them said it was a good idea. In
Right.
fact, they all told me nobody puts money in whole life insurance. That's a dumb thing. Like, people just try to scam you by selling you life insurance, and they just say, yeah,
Yeah.
this is a
Mm-hmm.
bad idea.
Mm-hmm.
And the best, the most ironic and funny thing about that was simultaneously I pulled up the balance sheet of Wells Fargo Bank that I worked for,
Mm-hmm.
and they had $18 billion in cash value life insurance on their
Yeah.
balance sheet.
Yeah, I did the same thing with their balance sheet a few years ago, and I saw
Well,
the same thing. It's like, whoa.
but the funny thing is, each one of those people I interviewed and talked to about this concept, they were all insured by the bank
Right.
because
Exactly.
they're that high level executive. They were the bank owned life insurance, the people that were being insured in order for that cash value to be on their balance sheet,
Mm-hmm.
and they were the ones telling me it was a bad idea.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that amazing? Like,
It is amazing. I'm going to piggyback off that story. I want to also come back. I want to make a bookmark and come back to you saying that you were in banking, but you didn't understand really even what you were really doing. Like I, like I want to come back to that because that's very fascinating. Because that's exactly what Nelson had a gift for eliminating noise and getting down to the very basic truth of what something really is. And I love that. And that's my mentor, Greg Cook, is really good at that too. But I remember Ray saying there's a bank called Intrust Bank, which is the largest family-owned bank in Kansas. And he actually did a test. He went into that bank and said, "Hey, I want to borrow some money, and I want to use this whole life insurance policy as collateral." And the people were like, and so he had to like go up the chain and have the vice president of the bank look at it and all this stuff. And they actually the same day approved the loan, actually, and loaned him some money, and it came quickly and everything. But then I think that it was either the president I remember this story very clearly. It was either the president or the vice president of the bank actually called Ray back and said, "This is really interesting. Could you come talk to me?" So he went to the guy's office and they talked, and Ray said, "I bet this bank has a life insurance policy on you, don't they?" And he said, "You know what? I think you're right." And he turned around and he like fumbled through some of their files and he pulled it out. And there it was, that he was the vice president of that branch, and they had that bank has a life insurance policy on that vice president. Same thing. And so it's just it's wild to pop the hood on this and see what's really going on, because when somebody tells you never to do something that they're doing all the time, like, you start to ask questions. Like, there's a moment actually in the movie Inception. Have you seen the movie Inception
no,
with Leonardo DiCaprio? A lot of people, he's training. It's like a kind of like a science fiction-y almost type movie where they actually kidnap people and hook them up to this machine where you get to share dreams with them. Like you fall asleep and you share their dream, and they try to like steal really private proprietary data knowledge from them by getting into your dreams and talking to you in your dreams and stuff. And so this Leonardo DiCaprio character like trains people how to get into other people's dreams and like steal stuff from them. And he tells them never do this and never do this and never do this. And then they go on the mission, and he's constantly doing everything that he's told them not to do. And they're like, wait a minute, what are you doing? And he's like, yeah, he's constantly doing everything that he tells everybody else not to do. But that makes you ask questions, you know?
Well, say this very often. Do what banks do, not what they say.
Yes.
Do what banks do, not what they say. Because of that story, they would not have ever told me to put money into whole life insurance, but that's exactly what they were doing.
Yes.
And the same is true when it comes to lending. Like they want to incentivize you to get these lower term loans by giving you a lower interest rate. But that is because it's for their good, not for yours.
Yes.
And they're actually making a much greater profit on that loan than you think, because they've reduced the interest rate to entice you to do it.
Yeah.
So there's a million other things like that, but just as you're saying that, it just reminded me that do what they do, not what they say.
Do what they do, not what they say. I remember Ray always said along the same lines of that, do what they do, not what they say. He would always ask, have you ever driven past a rundown bank?
No.
Like, no, they always have the greatest street corner in town, and you go into the lobby looks amazing, the staff are very helpful. This is very awesome, wonderful, profitable business. Why would I do what they say rather than just copying what they do? Like, exactly. why don't I just run the business myself? Why don't I take some of my own freedom back? So let's go back to the you were saying I was in banking and I was doing it all the time, but when I read Nelson's book, I suddenly like fully realized what I was doing. Can you go into some specifics on that?
Well, so I think I was oblivious to the fact of how the bank was actually making their money. The picture of a depositor, they have to entice you to put money on deposit at their bank by giving you some sort of a return, an interest bearing account, and you see the sign, you drive by the bank, they now, especially lately, they're putting big like temporary signs up in their yard that say, 3.9% APY, on your deposit account. And well, why do they do that? Because they need your deposits in order to then turn around and lend those deposits many times out to the same person who put the money on deposit.
Right.
And why do they do that? Because then they
certainly the same pool of people that made the deposit.
They make that whole spread in between. And I was thinking, well, I know that they make money on this mortgage that I'm producing for this person. Like I'm underwriting this loan, getting that person into this home or refinance or whatever the case may be. And they're getting interest off of that. But when I put together, because of Nelson's book, that it was never their money, it was always other people's money, OPM, depositors' money that was being lent out. Their rate of return was exponentially higher than I ever imagined. And then it made sense. It's like, wait a minute. That is how they have the nicest buildings. That is how they're operating a super profitable business, because I never understood the leverage component. And then I realized, wait a minute, I can have that same leverage. Maybe I can't lend out $10 for every $1 I have on deposit because of Federal Reserve, the fractional reserve banking fiasco that we're under. But I can take advantage of leverage in my own family's banking system. What an amazing advantage that I now have.
Yes. I hope this dovetails well, because this is more of a Michael curiosity question. But Joey, on a fixed rate mortgage, I don't care what the amortization period is, 15 years, 30 years. What was the average amount of time? Like, did you know these numbers? On a fixed rate mortgage, what was the average length of time that mortgage was in place before that mortgage went away and got redone or recast or the house got sold or whatever?
Well, I'm a little dated because I haven't been doing this for 10 years. But
Yeah.
at the time, it was somewhere in the realm of less than 3 years.
and
Literally,
so
yeah.
and so not only are they making the spread on other people's money, but they're paying an even amount of interest per month, per year on the deposits, but they front load all the interest through an amortization schedule on the loan, correct?
100%.
So that pushes their rate of return on other people's money even further. And so it is truly wild to look at the profits of a bank and then to think, for real, there is a way for the family to keep all that money, to build a family
Absolutely.
bank. And then it's mind blowing.
100%. Yeah. And but here's the other thing I don't want people to get discouraged by or miss the point of.
Yes.
I I have a background in banking, but that does not make me more successful than you setting
Yes.
up your infinite banking system.
Yes.
That's the beauty of this. You don't have to have some sort of major finance degree or
No.
education beyond just
Nope.
being a consumer in this world who has real expenses and needs in their lives. This book and the proper coaching will get you to the same level of success as it will without with the person with that background and with those degrees or whatever case may be. So
Hmm.
don't miss that point.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. I mean, look at me. I was a professional musician, you know, like
Exactly.
I grew up in a family where there was some entrepreneurial people and taught me some really good basic principles of money. And but look, I mean, I'm doing great. I've I've got loans out to people. I've taken loans to do all my own stuff. It's awesome. Um, that's great. So I also wanted to move. We were having a discussion, Joey, before the podcast got started about what we call. Well, I'll talk about the living wealth way of describing that later. Talk to me about what you were saying about um, people making it their system, or you remember what I'm talking about, right? With
Yeah.
that point you were making about people getting started with infinite banking, and this has been a really key point for you,
Yeah.
especially recently.
Yeah, what you were mentioning, like the top 6 basic principles of infinite banking, and one of those that really jumped off the page that I wholeheartedly agree with is that people succeed best when they implement a strategy.
Yes.
Well,
So let me pause real quick on there and let people know that is principle number 3 of the Living Wealth 6 Principles of Infinite Banking. And if you go back, it's a pretty recent episode. I don't remember the episode number. I could pull it up, but I won't. Right? It's a very recent episode. It's called the 6-Bit Principles of IBC, and strongly recommend that podcast. And principle 3 is people succeed best when they implement a strategy. But that really kicked off a really great point for you, Joey.
yeah. What we found over, like I said, 10 years of being a practitioner, teaching other people this idea and helping them to implement it is we found varied results, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
some people that would get really excited about this idea. They buy their first policy, their second policy, whatever the case may be. They get one on them, their spouse, their children. And a year or two goes by and you do kind of a check in, and they say, you say, "Man, how's it been going using your system?" And they say, "You know what? Honestly, I haven't taken a loan yet."
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, "I don't know about you, but like I'm dumbfounded by that." And I say, "Wait a minute.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're telling me you've been funding this thing for a couple of years. You've never borrowed against the cash value in your policy for buying an asset to create passive income,
Mm-hmm.
or investing in education, or paying off a debt or any of those things. Like none of those things happened over the last 2 years. And they
Wow.
say,
Yeah.
oh, no, I actually paid for my kids' college and, did this, did that, but didn't use the policies. And you're like, wait a minute. That let me give you an analogy of what's going on right now. You're operating out of someone else's bank. Think about this. You're the CEO of your own bank. You have your
Yes.
own bank with its own like brick and mortar location, and you walk into Regions Bank and you say, "Hey, I need to get all my banking stuff done.
Yeah.
Like I need to take a loan. I need to, pay off my debt, whatever the case is."
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Imagine for me what that bank teller would do, or what would they be thinking if you walked into their lobby and you started doing all your banking at Regions Bank or whatever your national bank is near you, and they knew you were the CEO of the bank that had a branch like just down the street."
Yes.
What would they be thinking?
You better be thinking. It's crazy. Like, do it with your own business, not somebody else's. That's what I would be thinking.
Yeah, they're like, wait a minute, am I getting set up right now? Like, surely the CEO of the bank down the street isn't coming to my bank to need, like, there's something wrong here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I told that to people. Why is it that you're not using your bank when you have a banking need? And what we found, Michael, is that people are this is a Wall Street mindset. Okay. We talk about wealth without Wall Street. A Wall Street mindset is you need to buy a product. Oh, I need an IRA for this. I need a 529 plan for that. I need a 403B or 401k for retirement. Like we have these buckets. They're really products that we're told we need to buy. So then when people come into the world of infinite banking, they're like, oh, this is another product that I need. And they go and they put it on the shelf. And they don't make it a part of their regular cash flow, like the money that flows through their hands from their active income.
That's exactly right.
Whether from their W-2 or their own business. And then they have expenses, but they never incorporate that into the insurance policy or policies becoming like part of your everyday life. And so what we developed over the last several years, Michael, is the biggest problem we found is people were not using it. So we created the passive income operating system where it shows people where does infinite banking flow from everything above your expenses needs to flow into the system. And I'll use page 35 in Nelson's book and page 48 as reference points. So you know that this isn't like Joey and Russ's idea. This is just building off of what Nelson's already told us.
Yeah.
And when that money flows into that infinite banking system, now I can start the process of buying assets with it that create passive income that flow right back into the system.
Yeah.
And it's like an income snowball. Like you've heard, financial gurus out there talk about a debt snowball. Well, if you use this system properly, you actually create financial freedom. You create more passive income than you have monthly expenses because you have an autopilot process that helps you turn active income into passive income while you sleep.
That's right.
Isn't that like the goal?
Yeah. Isn't that good?
It's amazing.
It's really good. I was laughing because I turned to page. I always have a copy of Nelson's book ready at hand, and I turned to page 35. There you go. Hey, let's hold him up. Take a screenshot. Yeah, no, I reread this book multiple times a year, but I was laughing because I love the principle. He says, the follow-up story in Fortune magazine in May 1995, EVA, economic value added works, but not if you make these common mistakes.
Yes.
And I love the one, managers fuss too much. I thought there's just you think about that, and it's funny when you read it, but if you think about it, it's very, very true.
Well, but you're right on the same page that this clicked with us. The number one thing, the reason why EVA doesn't work is they don't make it a way of life.
Yes.
And I apply that to, they don't put infinite banking into the natural flow of where their cash is going and where it's coming from. If you
So,
don't do this, you will
yes.
have very limited results and you won't create freedom. You may have, a policy that you just fund for 30, 40 years, and then eventually you have a bunch of cash and you live off of it. But what if we could use the cash today to create freedom from our 9 to 5, from our business that may be dragging us down? We're not using our highest and best use that God's given us
Yes.
because we're just putting up with what we have currently.
Yeah.
When this system could allow you to step into opportunities that you never would have done without it.
Yep. And I want to, it's beautiful and it's wonderful. It's true. I completely agree with what you're saying. And I want to liken it to something that many of our listeners will already be familiar with. Nate put a webinar together called The 4 Stages of IBC Commitment, where he lays out these 4 different stages that people fall into. And it's really his magnum opus. It's his compendium of 12 years of watching and helping people get started with this in their lives, and all the different stages that people actually go through. Like, we see this every day, every week, every month, and we've seen it for 20 years now with Ray included. So what you're talking about, 4 Stages of IBC Commitment is the name of the webinar. What you're talking about, Joey, is what we call stage 3. And
Perfect.
Nate calls that stage the entrepreneur stage. And that is where you actually make infinite banking a business that you run every month, every year. And you take, after you pay all your bills, you took every other dollar, every remaining cash flow dollar that you have, every dollar of free cash flow, and you put it into your policies before you do anything else. And any other major expenses that come along, a major appliance, a renovation for your house, a new roof for your house, a new vehicle, down payment on a different house, a cabin, a vacation home, a seed money to start a new business, money for a major investment, a vacation, a wedding, anything like that comes from your policy rather than from somewhere else. And we call that stage 3. So I wanted to liken that to that, because many of our listeners have watched the 4 stages and have benefited from it greatly, and will really benefit from seeing that what you're talking about is the exact same thing that Nate was talking about there in that stage of infinite banking commitment.
No, I love it. And I think when people start to visualize how this actually fits, they will start applying it at a much, much higher level. Like, for instance, we show people how you use it to pay your taxes every year.
Yes.
How you use it to pay off
debt. 4.
Okay.
Taxes is what we call stage 4. Like, it's interesting that you mentioned that. Going even further into it. Yeah.
And I think of it as, this is the practical way. If you've ever read Nelson's book, on page 48, he says 100% of your income should flow through your policy system. And people are always like, how is that possible? I don't even know how I could do that. Right?
Page 70, right?
Page 48. And it says your
page
system.
Page 70 is you get all your interest back. I screwed up. There you go.
Expanding the system to accommodate all income.
Page 48, that's right.
And we had people ask us this year after year, and we didn't have a solution. And when we put this passive income operating system on paper, all of a sudden it tells you, here's a question people have in their mind. I want to start another policy, but is now the right time? And do I have really the cash flow to do it? Do I have an extra amount per year that I can put through this system? And when you do this actual, like, you build this blueprint and you make it on autopilot, you'll have a buildup of cash into your system to where it tells you, hey, Michael, it's time to start a new policy because this
Yes.
one, your current system can't hold it.
Yep.
Then
That's
you're
right.
like, I don't need somebody to
Yep.
tell me. I'm
Yep.
the banker. I'm the
Yep.
one that tells when we're going to expand the system. And
Yep.
this, when you follow this blueprint, it literally tells you that.
It does.
It's so awesome.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Joey, I think that is so on time and so relevant, especially right now, because I get that question a lot, like, hey, when should I start another policy? And that is sometimes I have a really hard time answering that question because it's like, why don't you know? Like, because I'm already there and I know when I have this extra money, like, well, I don't have anywhere else to put it. Like, it's stuck in the bank. It's stuck in someone else's bank because my current policies can't hold it. That's
Right.
what tells me when I want another one. So I love that. So this has been such a great conversation, man. I can't thank you enough for being here. And I just know that I've benefited from this conversation so much. It's such a breath of fresh air, and I know all the other listeners will too, for sure.
Absolutely. And I don't know if it's something that we actually our team put together an ebook on this. If it's okay to share, like we just
Yeah,
want to give people freely.
yeah,
If you go to wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/living wealth, just in light of today's podcast, you can get a free download of that ebook so that
uh
you
huh,
can see the architecture and implement it with your coach at Living Wealth. Whatever is the best thing for you, we want you to have access to this because
yeah,
it creates transformation. And so we want to share that, and man, hopefully that helps you exactly where you're at.
absolutely. Really appreciate that. Um, Great. Well, Joey, thank you again for being here. Really appreciate your presence on the podcast. Do you have any other? What would be your closing comment on all of this today, if you were
And
to for one of the listeners?
I'll tell you what, this is the most powerful concept in the financial world. And as you are taking steps in it, it has the ability to change your life. It has the ability not only to change your life, but generations to come. And it is worth taking over the control and the function of banking. It's not easy. Nothing that is worth doing is super easy,
Yeah.
but it is simple.
Yes, it
And
is simple.
so
I was talking to a client about that this morning. He said, "Well, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it."
exactly.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, Joey. Again, this is wonderful. What a great podcast. What a wonderful time. This has been Dollars and Nonsense with Michael Duryea and with Joey Mure from Wealth Without Wall Street. And just remember, as we always say, if you follow the herd, you will be slaughtered.